Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going to be reacting to how did the Vikings reach America 500 years before Columbus? Columbus reached he sailed the ocean blue in 1492. Um, so we're thinking 992-ish, somewhere in that field. The Vikings are just an interesting topic. Besides the TV show itself, Vikings have, such a rich, just a rich culture and a rich origin that is spread multifold. Like before, the British became the colonizer that they became, um, or the imperialists they became. You have the Norse colonies. You have Normandy, which led to the Norman conquest. You have so much. Let's just take a look real quick. It's really interesting. And by the way, go to runningreality.com. This is not an ad. To be able to see through history. It's just like a Wikipedia for visual. So of course you have we're at the year 919 AE, or not AE, AD, or BC, or CE. Sorry, I'm just crazy looking at this right now. But so basically you have the Kingdom of Norway, and it's basically the Norse. This is predates the modern Norway. Obviously, we are a long ways away from the modern Norway. But from 1872 to 1397, you had the Kingdom of Norway. And then, of course, you have Normandy right here, which this predates William the Conqueror's Norman conquest. But then the island hopping campaign would presume to Greenland over here. The Norse colonies of Greenland actually go far as back to 838 AD. And then, we believe, of course, in next to the Innu, Nova Scotia and Maine, even in northeast Canada, that we had Norse settlements. So such an interesting thing. So I'm very excited to see how Knowledgia. We've seen a ton of their videos so far. I'd love to see what their take is on this, and let's learn together.
The story of Christopher Columbus discovering America has long been known and hotly debated. Can it really be called a discovery when the land was already inhabited? And what?
Yes, because it was a discovery for that culture.
What about the fact that he stumbled across South and Central America, not what we generally define as North America?
North America is Central America.
These questions are valid, but often overshadow another important inquiry. Why do we credit the discovery of the Americas by Europeans to Columbus and not the Vikings? Roughly 5 centuries before Christopher Columbus even laid eyes on American land.
And I'm going to go ahead and answer that question. Why do we tip our hat to Columbus and not the Vikings? I think in ancestry, and in class, Vikings were sort of thought about as barbaric at some points just because of the stories that were told. Now, Viking culture is very vast and wide, so I think that might be a part of it, but I'd love to hear what he thinks.
It was Leif Erikson, a Scandinavian.
And Leif Erikson is just the most prominent. I believe he's the most prominent figure in Viking lore culture. Also, I believe there is a meme in SpongeBob that plays homage to this guy.
Scandinavian Viking who stepped onto North American soil. And now, it's believed that he was actually the first European to ever do so. Leif Erikson was born in Iceland sometime around 970 AD to the prominent.
So that was even further back than what we were looking. This was about 50 years after what we were looking. We were looking at 919 AD. So, interesting. Okay.
Viking explorer Eric the Red. Eric had first lived in Iceland after his father had been banished from their ancestral land of Norway for manslaughter. But when Leif was just a boy, Eric himself was exiled from Iceland for following his father's footsteps and murdering a neighbor. This
Well, dang, this stereotype is stereotyping right now.
This meant that Leif spent part of his childhood in Greenland, where Eric had founded a new settlement. Once in adulthood, Erikson made the decision to journey to Norway, at which time King Olaf I Tryggvason convinced the young adventurer to convert to Christianity.
And not to talk about this, but I'm just thinking in my head, the blood, you know, like I would love to learn a little bit more about the science of this, but it is so true. Like if you live in a certain area, your body will adapt to that area, and the DNA and handing it down through genetics will continuously adapt to the environment you're in. It's just such a contrast in the not in the anatomy, not just like the personality or whatnot, but the actual anatomy, the science of the Viking body versus like a Caribbean body versus like someone that was born even in Southern Europe. I wonder what that looks like, you know, whether it be the thickness of the blood, whether it be, you know, the layers of fats that are just continuously more abundant in certain areas. It's just interesting things. The thickness of hair filaments. There's just some things that the Vikings had by default, which gave them such an advantage in this region.
The monarch then gave Leif the task of going back to Greenland to convert his fellow pagan settlers. But what actually happens next is unclear. That's because there are two sagas that give us differing ideas of how Leif Erikson spent his next years. Sagas are Icelandic legends, originally passed down and around by word of mouth, but later written down in the following centuries. In the case of Erikson, there are two sagas pertaining to the journey he took to the New World. While both give a timeline beginning around 1000 AD, the rest of the details tend to differ. In one saga, known as the Saga of Greenlanders, the story goes that Leif had heard fantastical tales of a mysterious land across the ocean from a man by the name of Bjarni Herjolfsson. Bjarni was a trader from Iceland who had sailed roughly a decade earlier toward what was supposed to be Greenland, but ended up being more in the direction of North America. While he never stepped foot on the land he had spotted off in the distance, he knew it was there, and that he had without a doubt overshot Greenland. Leif Erikson was
I wonder how like perplexed these people are, because this is like waking up in the morning, going into your living room, and then you're walking down the hallway. You're going to your office, or you're going to the bathroom or whatever, but there's a door, and instead of going to one place, you find something totally new, and you don't know what to make of it. It's just interesting.
thus profoundly intrigued by this idea of an undiscovered land, and decided to rally a crew to join him on a voyage to this new world. With 35 men and a ready ship, Leif was off to recreate Bjarni's journey. The explorer and his crew managed to sail successfully across the vast Atlantic until finally reaching the shores of North America, specifically somewhere in what is present-day Canada. Erikson named his new discovery Hetluland, which in Old Norse meant stone slab land, a fitting name for what the Vikings had at their feet. Today, historians have narrowed this area down to what they think is Baffin Island, but of course, the saga itself couldn't specify.
And there's so much, like, a lot of people distance themselves from things that are like sagas or like tall tales or old wives' tales, but there's history in everything and there's truths to everything. Now, not everything's going to be 100%, but you have to look both ways.
What it did say next was that the Scandinavians now made their way further south, likely to modern-day Labrador, which Leif thus called Markland, meaning forest land for its multitude of trees and lumber resources.
And you have like the Markland colonies, I think, on Greenland as well.
This new world was already proving to be quite
Pretty
a
sure.
positive find, and the Vikings became even more entranced as they made their way to what historians believe was the tip of Newfoundland. This is where it seems that Erikson and his men set up their base camp and spent the coming winter, taking advantage of the more tolerable weather than they were familiar with back.
Yeah, that's such an interesting thing. Like, imagine you're cold all the time, like throughout the year, and there's not really a lot of seasonality. But finally, you're seeing a temperature drop. Your arms aren't getting as cold. Your neck isn't getting as cold. It's just such a new feeling. It'd be like you're 5 years old again and you're going outside to play. Like, it's just an interesting new feeling.
Home, the Vikings' further explorations unearthed vast rivers filled to the brim with delicious salmon, stunning greenery all around, and so many wild grapes that Leif terms the region Vinland, or Wineland. All of this sounds wonderful and like an explorer's dream, but that's where the main foundation of the two sagas differ. According to the second, the saga of Eric the Red, discovering the New World wasn't an adventurer's success. It was a mistake. This alternative version posits that Leif was actually on his way back from Norway to Greenland, and it was he who overshot and stumbled across the American continent. Whatever the reason for the trip, Erikson and his men eventually made their way back to Greenland, around which time the death of Eric the Red made Leif the new chief of the Greenland settlement. From that point, Erikson would never again return to North American lands, leaving behind no permanent settlement or colony where his Canadian adventure had occurred.
So there's no for an encampment 1,000 years ago, that's going to be pretty hard to locate. But there's no archaeological like proof of these types of peoples in this area that could possibly justify one over the other. Maybe.
Other Vikings, however, would continue to explore the New World over the following years, and multiple temporary settlements were established. Only 3 years after Leif's expedition, his brother, Torvald, had been on an excursion of his own in North America when ongoing conflict with the native populations eventually led to his murder, making him what many believe to be the first European ever buried in American ground.
That's hard to believe, but that's interesting because he has a very good case of being the first, given that this predates at least 500 years from the Christopher Columbus crew coming in.
But that's still technically speculation, and many say that this whole narrative is yet unproven. In fact, can we trust these sagas at all? Are they real history? If you ask quite a few historians, archaeologists, and the like, yes, we can trust the Icelandic stories, and they do include actual historical facts, even if some of the details may have been tweaked over the years. Evidence to support the stories of Leif's trip to North America have been found, and it correlates tightly with the sagas. Back in 1960, Helge Ingstad, a Norwegian explorer in the search of Viking remnants in modern-day Canada, found just what he was looking for.
Okay.
After tirelessly probing the coasts of Labrador and Newfoundland, Helge unearthed remains of a centuries-old settlement on the northern tip of Newfoundland.
This is just what we were talking about. They're way ahead of us.
Particularly in the Lance aux Meadows.
Labrador
An archaeology team made up of archaeologists from around the world was thus brought in to examine Ingstad's findings, and the subsequent excavation confirmed that these ruins did belong to Vikings and were traced back to the same century that Erikson had allegedly settled in the area.
But you did say that other Vikings continuously went, so the Vikings were there. There's no real way to tell if Leif was there.
Furthermore, according to a piece in a journal called Nature, scientists had gone to the next level and actually tested 3 pieces of wood from the Viking ruins to see if they could pin down the exact year that they had been used. According to the journal, the project was successful, and the scientists were able to determine that the lumber had been cut in the year 1021
A little bit later.
AD. While this might...
That's so cool, though, that you can do that. It's so cool that you can pinpoint the exact year by the carbon dating in the isotopes.
might at first seem to contradict the sagas, which puts Leif's expedition closer to 1000 AD, many scholars say no, it does nothing of the sort. One in particular, a Viking specialist with the Institute for Northern Studies in Scotland by the name of Dr. Colleen Beatty, notes that the existence of Vikings in North America in the 1020s doesn't negate the fact that they could have also been there at the start of the century.
Yeah.
According to Dr. Beatty, whatever prompted the Vikings to cut down those trees
A house? Fire?
in 1021 could very well have been one stage of the occupation activity, not necessarily the first. And it's important to remember that it has already been theorized that a string of follow-up expeditions had pursued Erikson's. Whether
I just realized it says Lans Orcs Meadows. So this was reoccupied by the French way before this study. That's where it's at.
the ruins found were built in 1021
See, it still says Labrador Sea, so that checks.
AD, or the lumber tested was part of later repairs of an older structure, we can't know without testing the whole thing. But none of this disproves the sagas, even if the timeline is slightly off. If anything, this evidence further supports the entire narrative. So, was Christopher Columbus the first European to discover the Americas? Or was it Leif Erikson and his band
Leif
of
Erikson.
Vikings?
It's Leif
Did
Erikson.
Columbus discover the
But we're talking Europeans, yeah. But we're talking Azaic people that went on the west. That's a whole nother story, obviously.
south and central parts, and the Vikings found the north 500
Unless they were sea-bearing people. No, that's
years earlier? Or can we even call any of it a discovery, given the vast population of indigenous
yes, we can.
tribes that the continent already hosted? All of that is up for debate, but it's
Because here's an example: if we discovered North Sentinel Island, we discovered it. It was an uncontacted tribe, therefore there was no discovery, right? You know what I mean?
seems that the stories told in Icelandic legends about a Viking explorer finding the New World are no longer debatable. Today, the remains of Erikson's settlement in Newfoundland are part of an UNESCO heritage site.
Nice.
And in
We can go visit
1964,
it.
American President Lyndon Johnson declared October 9th to be Leif Erikson Day, marking the anniversary of the 1825 landing
That sounds just like a Lyndon B. Johnson thing to do.
of the Restoration, bringing the first organized shipload of Norwegian immigrants to the United States. Coincidentally, early October also holds the date of Christopher Columbus Day, and in 2023, both adventurers will be commemorated on the same day. Columbus and Erikson both brought European life and death to American soil. Both intruded on
And this would have never happened if his dad didn't kill somebody, which allowed him to be out, or what's it called? Exiled from Norway.
the land of the Native American tribes in the name of exploration and colonization. But technically, it was the Vikings that discovered North America first.
What a video. What a video. We learned all about we're going to look real quick. We're going to do a little experiment, people. So let's go about where they said 1021. Let's see what this thing pulls up. See right here. I'm gonna see. Look, we're actually getting Vinland, like we talked about. So this is very this is a really reliable site. You can see we were just here in the Leons Oaks Meadows, and it talks about exactly what we talked about right here. Very interesting. So you can click the Wikipedia, you can see all that. And Markland, we talked about that before. Oh, these aren't Markland as well. I thought these were Markland. I look at this all the time. Anyway, guys, thank you guys so much for watching this with me. If you're new here, hope you're doing well once again. And yeah, if you like these videos, maybe hit the subscribe button and we can react to some more content together. If you like anything related to European or Nordic or anything like that, and you think there's a video that I definitely need to react to, please feel free to comment below. But that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you so much. Peace out, and I'll see you guys next time.